And welcome to Rock, Paper, Swords, the historical action and adventure podcast. My name is Matthew Harvey.
And my name is Stephen A. Mackay.
We are both best-selling historical fiction authors, and together we chat about all things historical and anything that could fall under the banner of action and adventure in books, film, TV, and games.
Oh, and we also talk about rock music from time to time.
Alex Gough is an author of Roman historical adventures. The Carbo Chronicles, including Watchmen of Rome and Bandits of Rome, was written as a result of a lifelong obsession with ancient Rome and the culmination of a lot of research into the underclasses of the time. He has also written a collection of adventures following Carbo and other characters from Watchmen of Rome, where you can learn more about their rich lives. So welcome, Alex Gough.
Hello, Alex.
Thank you. And that bio is quite out of date. I'm in the process of updating my website at the moment, but it seems to be a strangely protracted process. So it doesn't even mention the last series, let alone the new book. So we'll get onto them.
That seems to be the main bio you can find, because I googled you as well today just to find out any wee bits.
Okay. I think it's more up-to-date one on Amazon, but I'll
That one was actually lifted off of the Canelo site.
Was it really?
I think so. Yeah. So
yeah, it's funny how these things all just get copied and pasted everywhere, don't they? It's yeah,
they do indeed. Well, so
tell us first a bit about your series of books.
Yeah, so I'll start sort of with the ones you just mentioned. The Carbo ones were my first trilogy that's got published. It's kind of with a circuitous route. I was with a sort of ebook publisher. I won't name them, although they have gone bust now. But it's
name them. Name them.
I don't know. Can you get? I don't want to say anything nasty about them, but
you can't get sued if you say anything true.
Well, that's true. Well, I can give an opinion. So basically, they were kind of like they were ebook only. They were going for a lot of volume, and they were taking on a lot of different authors in a short space of time. They did some editing and they did a good cover and stuff. So no major complaints. But second book, I thought I can do this myself. So the second one series I self-published, and then I asked if I could buy the rights back to the first book, so I could, even though the sales had dropped right off on that, I thought let's just so I can take back control of it. But they said they would only sell it to me for £10,000, which I thought was a bit steep. So I kind of left that with them. And then at that point, Canelo approached me, my current publishers. I was recommended to them by Simon Turney. I'm sure you both know. He's a good friend.
Yep.
And they said, we can't really carry on doing the Carbo series because you haven't got, you can't give us the rights to all the books. And they say, can you do like prequels or something else? And I say, I do something completely different. So I started this new series, the Imperial Assassin series, which are the first ones I did with Canelo. Shortly after which this other publishing company kind of imploded and went bust.
Well, I might know who they are now.
Probably the wrong. Yeah, I'll tell you later.
They split into two, didn't they?
You do know who they are. They split into two, but because they legally didn't, the company stopped existing. I got the rights back to my book without having to pay £10,000.
Nice. So, just as well you never paid, or you'd be.
I don't know. I don't know why you're averse to saying the name of a company that no longer exists. I don't know what you think's going to happen.
The people I don't know. I'm just ultra cautious, I guess. Anyway. But anyway, that's all went. Canelo then took over that back catalogue, republished them with new covers, and sold loads, even though they'd been out for a while, which is great. And then I wrote these 6-book series with Canelo, based around the life of these assassins that are part of an obscure sect, which is only mentioned once in the historical text. So everything about them is kind of made up from my point of view. But it's set in the reign of Caracalla, so it's a slightly unusual time period. And obviously he's a fascinating character. So they're quite in with him, especially as the novel series progresses. So you really get to see all the sort of guts and glory of his reign and all the sort of good and bad points. So that's been a lot of fun. But although it's left open, I've 6 books down. I've finished that series. I could come back to it at some point. But the latest one is about Mark Antony, and that's due to come out June the 22nd. So about 2 weeks from today as we record it.
Yeah, what's the title of that new one then?
It's called Caesar's Soldier. Yeah, been spent a long time playing around with titles on this one. So it's Caesar's Soldier, book one of the Mark Antony Chronicles. So I'm trying to get a little bit of sort of names in there for sort of brand recognition, as it were. And originally it was supposed to be a trilogy. So, and it was going to be relatively simply named, with name checking Cleopatra and Octavian in the other two books. But turned out there's too much to write about for just 3 books. So it's going to be 4, and having some real head scratching about what book 2 is going to be called at the moment. Maybe I have to repeat the Caesar bit in there, I think.
Well, you got Caesar Soldier. The second one could be.
You could maybe just use Mark Antony's name.
Mark Antony. Yeah, I was thinking.
Yeah. Or it could, Caesar's General was maybe something floating around in my head. Yeah, but I just know General's slightly anachronistic, isn't it? But people use it a lot. So
yeah,
I think
it's allowed. Yeah,
it's allowed.
I think so.
Oh, I mean, I don't know about you guys, but the amount of times people pick me up on anachronistic language, which is I kind of get it in that it's like, if you're using language that really pulls you out of the time period, like you say something like a broken record, then that's fair enough.
Yeah.
But just saying, well, they wouldn't have used this word in Roman times, it's frustrating because they wouldn't have used any of the words I'm using in Roman times because I'm writing in English.
Exactly.
We get the same thing whenever anyone does go that way. It's a bit strange. I agree with you. We had, I think, one of the very first conversations I had with Stephen online back in sort of 2015 or 2014 or something. I don't know if you remember, Stephen, but it was all about the use of the word adrenaline, and it was sort of talking about that. And I.
That was my book, and you were complaining.
Yeah, it was your book. Yeah, and I was commenting about it, and I said it threw me out of the story, and it was one of your very first books, I remember. And
I've never used it since.
Yeah,
but it was a funny thing though, because it sparked a whole conversation with loads of other writers and people getting involved online, and lots of them saying, "Well, adrenaline, of course, always existed, and what are you talking about?" And I said, "Yeah, but the actual thing, adrenaline, the substance, hadn't been discovered for another 1,000 years or whatever. So it felt weird to kind of refer to it by name." Anyway, that was a whole conversation.
Yeah, I never used the word alcohol, which is an Arabic name, I think. But so it means that the word wine gets repeated a lot. So it's or beer, depending on which part of the empire we're in. So sometimes I feel like I just want to put, the effects of alcohol were still in the system, but you can't.
Yeah, so, I mean, yeah.
In theory, you could.
I mean,
you could. But
like you say, it pulls you out of the time.
Yeah, that's so one person would leave the review, and that would be the one that sticks in your head. Some asshole's going to mention it, like Matthew did with adrenaline. But
well, I'm sorry. Yeah,
I'm glad you said that, because I was just wondering whether swearing's allowed on this show.
I used to beep it out, but I can't be bothered anymore. So.
So as a kind of little conceit, the last word of the first paragraph of every book in the Imperial Assassin series, all 6 books, is fuck. So like he's basically, he's sitting. So the very first book sits with him sort of staking out a British hill fort, and he's sitting in the woods with a stick up his arse and a rein going down his back of his neck, and he just goes fuck. And so I decided to carry that on to every single book. It starts off in some sort of situation. And I kind of thought, at least people are going to know what they're dealing with, because there's quite a lot of swearing in these ones. But almost all my 1-star reviews are people complaining about the swearing, not the sex, not the violence.
That's really interesting.
Yeah,
we just following on from that, we just Dan Jones has got a new book. The second book in his Essex Wolves series is coming out in October, I think. And I just saw yesterday he posted a thing about it being up on NetGalley, and he was kind of boasting about one of the first reviews said for the first 3 chapters, which was 38 pages, there were 35 uses of the word fuck. And they said this is a warning to people going to read it. And he sort of put that as like a boast almost.
Yeah.
But I just think that that's a lot of fucking.
That's a lot, yeah. Yes. Well, I've kind of taken it on board in that majority of people, and I think the vast majority of people who are reading the sort of books that we're writing don't care, but some do. So for the Mark Antony ones, I've been much more circumspect about that sort of stuff, just because I can do it without putting those words in, and if it's upsetting a very small minority, why do it? But it does fit quite well with the other books, and it's a stylistic thing. So I'm not changing it for the old ones, but for the new ones, it's a new series it can.
I've got swearing in my books. When I was saying to Stephen about it, we were discussing just yesterday or the day before, and I still use the F word if we're not going to keep on saying it now to not offend people too much. But yeah, I use it in the books, but it's normally in a moment of like heightened anxiety or combat situation with life or death, maybe used 2 or 3 times in the whole novel. It's not like every other sentence, because the argument I think for it is, soldiers swear a lot and all this sort of stuff. You think, well, yeah, okay, they do, but it becomes a bit annoying to read it.
It can lose its impact repetitive too much. I think one very lengthy 1-star review was all about the fact that he went very much into the etymology of it and the fact that this word was not used until the 1700s, which completely ruined the book for him. But as I said,
that's wrong anyway. Yeah.
Well,
that's wrong anyway.
None of these books were, none of these words were used in Roman times anyway. The one other thing that I got picked up on was, which I think is probably legitimate, although it's relatively obscure when I've tried Googling it, is you don't fire a bow, you shoot a bow. And I got picked up for that. I guess you guys know that, but
yeah. Well, there's no fire involved, is there?
You lose the arrow.
Yeah, but if you look it up online, it's a commonly used terminology to say you fire an arrow.
It's wrong. Yeah,
it's wrong.
You loose an arrow. Yeah, you actually loose an arrow. Yeah, you shoot a bow or you loose an arrow.
Yeah.
But it's
it's all these little things that you can get picked up on, and it's kind of it's part of the fun of it, isn't it?
So that's different. Yes, that's different, because that's actual incorrect use of grammar. Using fire for
that is different.
I suppose it's using the wrong word.
It's like say, but once someone's sometimes these I do read the reviews, because sometimes people do say some stuff that's actually quite useful.
You can't help reading reviews, I think, unless you get to the stage you've got so many reviews that you can't keep up with them, which I don't think any of us are in.
Especially since they changed the system now, so you can leave star systems. I don't know if you've noticed, but the number of reviews has gone down as the number of ratings has gone up, because people can get away with just clicking a button for some stars now. So
I've got an Alexa, and every now and again my Alexa is in the kitchen and I'm cooking dinner or whatever. My Alexa suddenly goes bling, and it goes, by the way, 3 weeks ago you bought Alex Gough's latest book. Would you like to leave a rating? And so if I'm in the mood, I'll say yes. And he goes, how many stars do you give it? And I go, 5. Beep, thanks, that's it. And then it never pops up ever again. It never says, would you like to leave a written review or anything? No, that's it.
Yeah.
And so that's why it's happening, because people are just getting prompted. Say, leave a rating. You go, okay, then.
Well, that's
it's silly, really, because Amazon trying to cut down on fake reviews, but actually it's very easy to leave a fake 5-star review, a fake 5-star rating, as opposed to leaving an actual written review. You can spot a fake review much easier than you can spot a fake 5-star rating.
That's a fair point.
I don't know. I mean, that's a whole different thing. I don't know how many fake reviews there really ever were on books, but it seems to worry writers a lot more than it was really an issue, I think.
I think it maybe happened to a few people that they get piled on. Maybe a Goodreads group has decided to really shaft somebody. And so they've left like 100 1-star reviews. And if your book had only just come out, that's you really kind of in trouble then.
Yeah, you're right. That can be pretty bad. Yeah.
Good hard way, Matthew.
So, I was just going to ask the second question we've got, because we've kind of gone off and around and tangents and answered some questions we haven't asked yet. But when did your obsession with Rome start? Because all your books seem to be about Rome.
I mean, I started read it, a bit of Hadrian's Wall, obviously, when I was really young, and some museums around where I grew up in Hastings, and then at school, it just seemed like a really, I think for a young boy and teenage boy, there's just a lot that appeals about Rome, with all the sort of the battles and the swords and sandals side of things. But then when I was sort of late teens and 20s, I started reading Colin McCullough's First Man in Rome series, which introduced me to all the politics side of things and the sort of the massively complex history and the rich characters, and it's just an incredibly well-known, well-documented period of time, isn't it? And there's so much richness in there. I was thinking about this because I've been rereading the sort of the Tolkien books, like Lord of the Rings, and people always sort of go about what a wonderful world builder he was, and he invented a language and invented all these maps, and it makes his book so rich. And then and it's true, but I think, well, actually, we've already got all that in Rome, and way more than the one man's invented. We've got this massively rich tapestry of history and characters to draw on.
But that's why they're rating Tolkien, because he actually did it from
True.
scratch, which is incredible, right?
I mean, from his head,
true.
yeah.
But yeah, we're not don't have to reinvent the wheel for when we're writing about Rome and places like that. So
I find it quite daunting because I'm writing about a period now. I'm writing a book set in the 19th century,
right.
and of course, there's loads of information there, and I find it quite daunting going from 8th, 9th, 7th century to that, because suddenly it's like I know that pretty much everything I write is going to be wrong.
I know.
Or somebody's going to say,
somebody will know.
Well, I've got some Second World War stuff planned, and I think that's kind of going to be daunting, while at the same time I don't think it's so different from modern times that you can't extrapolate a little bit. They had telephones and they had radios and things like this, so it's not too far out of a comfort zone.
Yeah, it's similar to when we grew up. It's not like nowadays.
Yeah. Certainly when we were certainly when we were growing up in the 70s or 80s or whatever, it's it wouldn't be a million miles away. So that's a future project, but I've got to get through a few Mark Antony books first. But yeah, so going back to that, I read these Colin McCullough books, and I'd been writing. I'd always been writing short stories, and I'd tried to write like a fantasy novel. I actually wrote a full-length fantasy novel, but I never tried to do anything with it. And then, having read some Colin McCullough, I thought I'd have a crack at writing a Roman book, and it was set in the year of the Four Emperors. It was actually called Five Emperors because it included Nero, and that was kind of researched with just like a couple of like Tacitus and a couple of books out of the library way before the internet. I wrote it in about, I think I finished writing it in about 97, 98. Tried to get it published then, and I didn't send to that many people, but no one was interested. And people said my background was was as a vet, trained as a vet, and had a zoology degree. And the agents that I wrote to were like, oh, go away and write something about that. We might be interested. You don't know anything about Rome. So, but then weirdly, I got it published online in about 1999, 2000 as an ebook. Back before ebooks were really things, and no one had Kindles, so they came.
There's just HTML.
It came on a floppy
web
disk,
page, basically.
So that's pretty retro.
Wow.
So
that's very retro.
I never knew they existed.
So so that was kind of way back, but then it just that company went bust because obviously no one was reading stuff online, and so I started writing sort of. I gave up on the fiction for a few years and started writing non-fiction. It's related to my work, and then once I was sort of got past that sort of stage of my career, I thought, what if I really want to write something I enjoy, as opposed to something that I think will just be commercial, like a rom-com or crime or something, then write what you enjoy. And I went back to writing ancient Rome at that time, and that's when the Carbo one came back.
So there's two different questions I want to ask following on from that. But first, I'm going to go with asking you a bit more about the book that you're writing at the moment and Mark Antony. So Mark Antony, the subject of this new book, Caesar's Soldier. So how important was he in his own right, Mark Antony? I know he's like consul and stuff. He's sort of often in the shadow of Julius Caesar and Cleopatra. I guess they're going to overshadow him as a character. So how important was he in his own right?
So writing about him came up over a lunch with my editor. We talked about what to do next, and
who is your editor?
It was Michael Baskar at Canello, but it just moving on to Craig Lai now. Michael's kind of because Michael's one of the directors, so he I think he doesn't do much editing now. But yeah, we were just talking about like what's commercial, what could do well, and I think some of the big names in history can sell quite well. So you look at what Ben Kane's done, like Spartacus and Hannibal and Richard the Lionheart. And I just suddenly went, well, no one's done Mark Antony, have they? So let's give that a crack. So I started looking into it. found out, he's just a really interesting guy. And yeah, he's kind of a lot more of a person in his own right, or historical character in his own right, than I think history gives him credit for, because he is, from the Shakespeare's point of view, he is a bit part in Julius Caesar, or it's Antony and Cleopatra. It's not just Mark Antony. And actually, Cleopatra's quite late on in his life. She's not, although she appears in the first two books, she's not going to have any major role until book 3 in my series. And obviously, Caesar, spoiler alert, dies at some point towards the end of book 2.
You're joking.
I know. I was just giving it all away. But he was like, as you say, especially after Caesar died, he was the sole ruler of Rome at that stage for a while, even if it was a relatively short while. He was way in the ascendancy over Octavian, and for most of the time he was in the second triumvirate, or he was in partnership with Octavian. He considered himself the senior partner, so effectively the ruler. And he was a great tactician. He was physically strong. He was brave. He was reputedly handsome. And what was a bit of a relief is that he seemed like to have been quite a nice guy, because he sort of, you don't really want to write about an asshole for four books and or spend all that time trying to justify him. And you want your readers to like him. But he's
a hero then.
Yeah, but he's obviously got a lot of well documented flaws, like his drinking and his womanizing. And I found out he actually wrote a lost to history dissertation on his own drunkenness, which he published.
Nice.
Quite cool. But
probably two flaws that most of those kind of noblemen in history
exactly.
had,
and the hostile historians, as like with Caracalla, the hostile historians will often emphasize the worst traits and minimize them in other people and maximize them in the ones they don't like. But he was he treated women pretty well, although he was he was a womanizer. He did seem to genuinely love people like Fulvia and Cleopatra that he was that he was married to, and he was he didn't seem to be abusive or nasty, and he had a good sense of humor. He played tricks on them. He was sort of respectful to his enemies. So when Brutus died in battle, he made sure his body was recovered and given all due honors, and he stopped a massacre. So early on in his career, there's before he meets up with Caesar, he marches his troops across the desert in Egypt to regain the throne for Ptolemy, and with a sort of bit of tactical brilliance, he manages to defeat the incumbent Egyptian without too much bloodshed. And then when Ptolemy arrives, who's been in exile, he's absolutely furious and wants to massacre the entire population. And Mark Antony, who's actually quite a junior officer at this stage, just stops him and says, "No, I'm not doing it." He kind of had the guts and the morals. So the more you actually write and read about him, the more actually come to like the guy. It's very nice.
That sounds really interesting. When you mentioned that you're doing Mark Antony, and the more you talk about him, in my mind, all I can see is James Purefoy from the Rome series.
Yeah, same here.
And he kind of portrayed him very much as you're saying, sort of this.
He did
light-hearted, but kind of good looking and charismatic and whatever, but still
he did kind of emphasize. Yeah, I think he portrayed him really well. But there's I think I read about this in my author notes, but there's I came across this PhD thesis about Mark Antony that has also been published in a sort of book form, but it's very academic. It's basically talking about the portrayal of Mark Antony in 20th and 21st century screen, and it's particularly comparing sort of things from the 20th century to the HBO's Rome with James Purefoy. And it's a really interesting sort of conclusion that Mark Antony is always portrayed as flawed, but the emphasis of his flaws changes over time, as with our current thinking. So in the 20th century, and often in the Roman times as well, he was considered too much under the influence of Cleopatra. He was too effeminate. He wore makeup and perfume and dressed in more effeminate clothing, and Cleopatra kind of ruined him as a man. And all the best parts of him in the 20th century stuff were him being brave and heroic and being able to drink anyone under the table. And HBO's Rome, it's turned on its head, and actually those are the worst bits of him: his aggression and his drinking and his womanizing, and he's portrayed as too masculine and too toxic masculinity. And the thesis is basically saying this is how Mark Antony is portrayed tells us more about our current ways of thinking than it does about the man himself.
That sounds really interesting. Anyway, it's definitely making me want to read the book. So hopefully the listeners are feel the same.
Good. Yeah. Well, certainly a lot, and surprisingly large amounts of writing. I mean, I knew it was going to be a big task because obviously that particular period of history in the fall of the Roman Republic is so well documented. But actually a lot is known about Mark Antony himself as well. And obviously in the first book, you've got to do a bit of filling in the gaps, which as historical fiction authors, we have that luxury. So, I mean, I don't know what your approach to these sorts of things is, but there's a historical accuracy thing. My approach is always, if I possibly can avoid it, I would never knowingly put in something that I knew was not true in a book. But I'm quite happy to choose the less likely of two possibilities. So if the sources say he probably did this, but he could have done that, I'm quite happy with the could have. So, for example, in my Imperial Assassin series, Julia Domna is probably Caracalla's mother, but there's an outside chance she is his stepmother, which allowed me to put in a juicy love affair. So I made her the stepmother, and because there were rumours that they were having an affair, but that's kind of more palatable if she's his stepmother than his mother. And then with the Mark Antony one, I've had him go to Britain with Caesar. No one knows if he went or not. He's not mentioned, but then Caesar didn't really mention many people in his underlings at that time anyway. And when Caesar crosses the Rubicon, I've been sort of agonizing because the situation at that time is that Mark Antony is in Rome as a tribune, and he has to flee Rome dressed as a slave to go to meet Caesar, or to flee to Caesar's safety in Gaul. And this is when Gaul starts the civil war by crossing the Rubicon. But most of the textbooks say that Mark Antony reached him after he'd already crossed the Rubicon. And because I'm doing it from a very close third person, so you're only seeing anything through the eyes of Mark Antony, I was kind of agonizing that I was going to miss out on this great opportunity.
You need him to be there.
Yeah. And then I found a reference saying that he might have been there. So I was like, yeah, that's enough. So he will be there.
Yeah. I think for me, that's one of the things that puts me off writing about a real historical character, is that it becomes much more difficult to reconcile that fudging of events. Whereas in my main series with Bearbrand, I mean, he's around with all these kings and everything, but obviously he's never mentioned in the record because he doesn't exist, but very much like Uhtred or Sharp or these other sort of tangential non-historical characters, I can put him anywhere, so if I can get him there logically within the story, then he can be at the crossing of the Rubicon or whatever.
Yeah.
And very much like the Rome series, I know the characters of Titus Pullo and the other guy, what's his name, Varenus.
Lucius.
Yeah, those are both Lucius Varenus, and they're both mentioned, aren't they?
Yeah, in
Caesar's
Gallic Wars.
They a bit like one line or something.
Yeah, it's a paragraph. Yeah.
But obviously they're like fictional characters in the series, and they can just put them wherever they want. They can just maneuver them to be any great event within the story, which is clever.
Yeah, absolutely.
So when you've got a main character like Mark Antony, it makes life complicated.
It's a completely different challenge, actually, because it's the first time I tried to do historical fiction, biographical fiction, or whatever you want to call it. But it's enjoyable because you're there's a lot more sort of research involved, and that's quite. I find that quite fun anyway. And it's has some challenges, but it also has some advantages because sometimes when, as you say, that exact scenario, you're like, right, I need to put this character here. How on earth do I get him from over there to over there? When he's 100 miles away and he needs to get there in 12 hours or something. And then with this, it's like you don't have to worry about that because it actually happened. If they say he was there, he was there. It doesn't matter how he got there.
Yeah. Well, I know Stephen's writing at the moment about Alfred, and it's the same. We had this conversation. I was sort of saying about it, and Stephen, you were saying about how having like a timeline to work to gives you the overall structure of
it saves you having to write your own framework. You don't have to make it all up. It's all written down for you, and you just have to follow it and then try and slot in exciting events in between that are not mentioned in any timeline. Maybe even probably didn't happen, but they're realistic enough to make things that bit more exciting for the reader as well. So yeah, like you say, it's a different challenge to just making everything up yourself, but it's fun.
And obviously, there's things that some things that must have happened but aren't documented. So just conversations with with wives and family, or births of children. No one's documented what happened at that time, but he had children, or so you can describe events that aren't documented just because they have actually taken place in
it humanises a character then to show them with the birth of their child or whatever.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So you mentioned research quite a bit, and so far, do you travel to the places that you write about? Do you think it helps if you have, or is it necessary?
Yeah, I don't specifically do that. I don't go there specifically because it's in the book, and actually, I'm not sure how much that actually helps. Given, I think if you've got maybe like a landscape, so you've got a big battle and you want to look out over the scene and picture it, that might be more useful. But going to most places around where the Roman Empire was, you're not getting a great feel for what it was really like. But what I do like doing,
unless there's a ruin or something.
Yeah, but what I do like doing is going to places that are reasonably, intact, and then just getting a feel for what it was like to be in Rome. Or so I managed to get to Pompeii year before last for the first time, and Herculaneum, and spent ages just standing in the houses, just trying to picture what it was like to be moving around in those things, and actually having written loads of descriptions of peristyliums and atria and stuff like this, to actually sort of stand in them and see how big they are, and how much distance there is before you get into the triclinium and stuff like that. It was really useful.
That's it's interesting you said about the not thinking it's that useful, because some writers really think it's like incredibly important to go to the location. I'm a bit in between. I agree. I've often don't travel to the places that I write about. Sometimes I travel after.
Too far away.
Well, sometimes you can't. But sometimes it happens after the event. That's become a bit of a running joke with my wife, is that every time I'll like finish a book, it gets published, and a month afterwards we go on holiday to the place I've just written about or something. It's like, for fuck's sake, we could have done this a year ago. It would have been a bit helpful. But on the other hand, I find going to if you're writing about, I don't know, Rome, going to Rome now, even though obviously the city is very, very different, or anywhere in Italy really, obviously it's very different, but you do get a sort of feeling for the place and the weather and the smell,
I agree,
and the heat and even though obviously everything has changed, the food has changed and the language has changed, stuff, you can kind of take on board some of what's going on now and just sort of regurgitate it through your imagination into what it could have been like then,
I agree. And I've been to a lot of Roman remains, so I'm not saying I don't travel to these places. I've every time we go on holiday, I'm seeking out where the Roman remains are and checking them out. And
not more ruins.
Yeah, exactly. Well, usually it's
told by my
family behind while I go off and do it, and they go and stay by the beach or whatever. But I think it's trying to replicate the experience can take a little bit more imagination sometimes, so when I went to Pompeii, I took a wander through Naples, managed to get myself mugged at the same time as I think most people do go to Naples.
Nice. So you can incorporate that.
I actually managed to get rid of the guy just by shouting very loudly at him, and he ran away without success. That was quite nice. But
what did you shout?
I shouted the word that my characters use a lot in my books. But nice. No, but the point was I was walking through bits of Naples, and like narrow, tall streets with washing hung across between them, and these sort of tall houses that look like insulae, and I felt much more like I was walking through ancient Rome than when I walked through Rome. It felt like it was gone back in time a bit to do that, and also so the research.
I use lots of.
So go on.
So I was just going to say, for the inspiration, lots of my inspiration for what things were like long ago is from trips I've made to places that are very different from where we live now. So places like India or Morocco and places like that, where life is very, very different from our normal suburban life in Britain. And it's easier to imagine, when you're seeing sort of real poverty and the way people live, you can think, oh, this is closer to what people would have been living like in the Dark Ages, for example, or in ancient Rome.
And I like a good reconstruction as well, or a reenactment or things like that can help and sort of inspire you, and again give you a bit more of what it may have been like, more than say looking at a pile of stones and then trying to build it up in your mind. But the other thing is I've got probably several hundred books about Roman history and stuff, I should think by now, and some of them are quite got some quite good detail in them. So I've got a book about I can't remember the exact title of it now, but it's something like the multi-sensory experience of ancient Rome, and it's an academic book, but it's all massively detailed work about what it smelled like in Rome, what it sounded like in Rome. There's one chapter about what it's like being in a fuller's, and it's talking about the smell of the ammonia from the urine they used to process the clothes, and the sound of the people stamping their feet to wash it, and the sort of iridescent rainbows in the spray that came up from the fullers. And it gave me a really detailed idea of what it must have been like to be there.
Those things are very much like you would see in places like Morocco or India now. They'll be using very, very similar processes to do things, because I remember the stink of fresh leather being tanned in Morocco.
I went to the leather place
absolutely
in Morocco.
stinky, and they're selling. Yeah, and I'm thinking that hasn't changed. That's going to be the same as 2,000 years ago. If you go to a tanner's on the edge of some city in Rome or something, it would be,
So as I was saying, it's being sort of using your imagination and creativity to find things that might give you more of an experience than you might think just by, say, going along Hadrian's Wall or something like
that. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and sort of combining the two things.
Yes.
The location of Hadrian's Wall, and then thinking what the people were actually like and what they were living like, what they were doing.
And you did mention the reenactment stuff. That is actually one of the questions that we were going to ask you. Do you like to dress up as a Roman soldier?
No, I've never got into that, actually. I think it's looked a little bit.
Just for listeners who obviously can't see you, Alex is actually dressed as a full centurion at the moment in full regalia, so he's lying.
But do you have any kind of like weapons or nothing? No?
Not a thing. No, I
helmet,
said to my wife,
sword.
I said to my wife the other day I fancied getting a gladius, and she just laughed at me. So I don't know. I love watching it, but I think those guys put a lot of effort into into their authenticity of their armor and maintaining and making it themselves half the time, and I haven't felt I've got like the time and energy to do that.
Yeah, I think that takes a lot of research as well, because you have to get it right.
Which is great when I go to Roman festivals. I go to one in York, and I can't make this one year at Eberacum, and one in Colchester. Speaking to reenactors there is really good fun, and you can just you learn so much from them because they've done so much research about it.
Yeah, it's handy for you. You can just steal it all and put it in your books.
Exactly, yeah.
Oh, you personally.
And take some,
Well, there's a question. We've got a question here that Stephen, I think, wants to skip it for time's sake, but I want to ask it. Actually, I want to actually just mention it in passing. You mentioned that you're a veterinarian. Are you still working as a vet now? Or
no, I'm doing a PhD at the moment. So that's which is kind of part. So at the moment, I did I stopped vetting in 2019. Did 2 full years, full time. PhD years, and then the last 2 years have been part-time to concentrate more on the writing, and then I'm hoping to finish the PhD by next spring, and then I'm probably going to do mainly writing with a little bit of research.
So this is now another question that's, because I was going to ask about the whole thing of how come so many vets end up.
I know Ben Kane and Amanda Scott.
There's Ben Kane. There's you. It's like, what the hell?
Amanda Scott as well. She
used to be a vet.
Yeah.
Well, it was Jean Gill I was thinking of, because I don't know if Jean Gill's a vet, but she's written books about training dogs or something anyway.
I mean,
and Ben Kane Scott was actually a vet as well. So
and Ben Kane used to live in my village as well. So that's a really weird coincidence.
All right.
Yeah.
So there was 2 vets in the village.
Two vets, both writing Roman fiction in the same village. Yeah.
so that's weird. But then the new question I've got that's come from your answer about studying a PhD is what what is your PhD about, and why on earth study a PhD at at this stage in your life to think, right, I'm going to do a PhD now?
Yeah, it was just well, I was at that stage of my career where I kind of got a bit bored of vetting and happy to move on and do something else, and I still want to do something sort of scientific and academic. I've always actually.
But you were writing historical fiction at this point, right?
Yeah,
yeah. So most people would say you've already found a different thing to move
job,
on to.
Yeah. So well, I just kind of like to keep busy. So it's the title is something on the lines of biological variation in human medicine. It's basically how people's sort of blood test results vary over time, which may not be very well understood by doctors. If you take some of it's understood, some of it isn't. But as an example, if you take your blood pressure one day and then take it the next day, it'd probably be a completely different reading, but nothing's actually changed. It's just a bit random. So I'm kind of quantifying that and seeing how much of an impact it has.
Yeah, that's interesting. I've got high blood pressure, and whenever I take medication for it and everything. Whenever they ask you to take tests, especially at the early stages, it's like you've got to do millions of tests of take your blood pressure several times. So because as you say, it fluctuates.
Well, they kind of understand it in blood pressure now, but it's one of the only things they do. But actually, all measurements vary, and to a greater or lesser extent. So it's trying to work out how much they vary as to whether that's an issue or not. But I went to a lecture. The professor who supervised me was talking to some medical students, and he was saying all measurements vary, and someone said no, they don't. He goes, name one that doesn't. They said height. And he said, well, height varies by up to an inch a day.
So I knew that.
Yeah, you can be up to an inch taller. Which way around is it when you wake up?
In your car. If you're in your car in the morning, and then at night you have to move the mirror sometimes because you've shrunk a wee bit.
Yeah,
absolutely. I remember reading that somewhere.
Yeah.
So I've got the next question. Moving on to the next question, then. I think you mentioned, I don't know if we were already recording or not, but I think you mentioned that you're into rock music, fan of Iron Maiden people. So, in your opinion, who is the world's best guitarist apart from Stephen A. Mackay?
Well, obviously he's up there, but that aside, I mean, I'm kind of big fan of all these sort of 80s and 90s virtuoso guitarists, and I've been to see quite a few in concert a few times, so Steve Vai and Joe Satriani. But John Petrucci from Dream Theater, he regularly wins sort of Guitar Player of the Year, and he's just incredibly technically gifted, but also very, very creative. It's this progressive metal that has these very complicated time signatures and key signature changes and things, and it's very. I try and play some of it, but it's not easy at all.
I don't even attempt it.
Have you heard any Dream Theater?
Somebody years ago tried to get me into them, and it was really the vocalist that it was just a bit too kind of high pitched for me. The screechy. Really.
I went to see them in concert a couple of months ago, and the vocalist has kind of voice is completely shot, and he was always their weak link, and now it's kind of dreadful. The rest of the band are complete virtuosos. There was in
his defense, the vocal range is very difficult to maintain, whereas you can still move your fingers when you go.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah,
it's absolutely.
It's more of a physical limitation as you get older. It's tough.
Yeah,
but I was in a band that the guys wanted. One of the guys was a massive Dream Theater fan, and he wanted us to do like Dream Theater stuff, and I was like, nobody else in the band in the end.
It's too hard to learn for a kind of part-time,
fun band.
You
have to really dedicate yourself. I mean, because the keyboard player is a chap called Jordan Rudess. He's one of the it's kind of acknowledged one of the best keyboard players in the world as well, and. Recently, there's I don't know how up on your classical music you are, but there's a very famous pianist called Leonard Bernstein who died a few years ago, and they were going through his archives and they found a letter in it written by an 8-year-old boy, and it said written in about 1960 or 1970 something, and it said I really like your music. I think you're quite good. I think I'm actually a bit better than you. Would you like any advice? And they tracked this guy down, and it turned out to be Jordan Rudess from Dream Theater who wrote the letter, and Leonard Bernstein had kept it in his archive all that time.
You must have thought it was hilarious.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
But he's bloody good though. So
yeah, I was actually talking to. I was at the Canelo literary bash on Tuesday night, which Stephen, you didn't jet down from Scotland for. I noticed.
I was invited, but I thought it was just a bit too far. I always get invited to stuff in London. It's like furthest end of the country away from me.
Would have been a long way for about 3 hours. But I was talking to Angus Donald there, and we were talking about music and listening to music while you're writing. I don't know about what you guys do about this. He was saying he can't do it at all. And for me, it depends on what I'm writing. If I'm writing something that's quite complicated, I'm trying to get dates or a battle scene just right, I have to have silence. But a lot of the time, I found myself listening to Rush. And it's a band I've been into since the 80s. And I like the music, but it's not massively challenging or bangy or crashy. And I know the music so well, it's kind of just like background noise. So I find it quite calming, and it kind of drowns out a lot of other noise at the same time. So I think that's one of the big ones I listen to a lot.
We've talked a lot about listening to music and stuff, and both of us like to listen to things that are not very
melodic.
That have got no lyrics, basically, and not so melodic
when
we're writing. But I found recently, just this week, I've been, because like you, though, there's certain bands that I can listen to, like Queen, for example. I can listen to that I've heard so much that even though there are lyrics and it's melodic, and I'm almost singing along in my head, it's like on a whole different level that I'm not actually really hearing it, even though it's going on. And but I still can't do it for writing, but I'll do it for editing though. This week I've been writing in the morning, or up till sort of early afternoon, quite flat out, listening to just sort of theme music from films or whatever, soundtracks. And then when I get then I take a break, and then I do some editing whilst listening to music like Queen or a band, with lyrics and Iron Maiden or something. But that seems to work. I can edit and still have music
it's going a different
on,
mindset.
I can't write doing it.
But I'm surprised, Alex. You're a guitarist, I take it.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I don't know, because if I put Rush on and try to write, I would have to stop and start playing the guitar, something like 2112 or Fly By Night.
So you got to get the right
stuff.
You got to get the right tracks. You got to listen to their 80s stuff, not their 70s stuff, because that's much more.
No, I don't like that.
Well, exactly. It's probably, I wouldn't necessarily choose to listen to it in the car, but to listen to write to, it's a bit blander than the early stuff.
Right.
So,
that's nice. No,
so
I listen to black metal, actually, like Enslaved and early Behemoth and Immortal and Mayhem and all that kind of stuff. And I find it's just like white noise. So
is this a common thing amongst ancient history writers? Because Simon Turney's very into his black metal as well, isn't he? I think.
Yeah, that's right. I've spoken to him before about it. Yeah, I think it's just basically white noise, isn't it? Some people like movie soundtracks because it's bombastic, but not really particularly melodic. Or, it doesn't have a 4/4 beat like AC/DC or something. It'd be impossible to write to because you'd be tapping your feet and singing along.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, but I mean, talking of the metal stuff, congratulations on your theme tune. So awesome. I thought about having a crack at recording a tribute to it, but I didn't get a chance, didn't get time. But
all right, you'll have to.
If you do, you can definitely do a little tribute, and we'll stick it on the episode.
But I can't sing, so I can't compete with your voices, I'm afraid.
Well, you can lay down the track. Just do an instrumental, then we'll just chuck an instrumental at the end.
I'll stick something on GarageBand then if I get a chance.
We'll do an instrumental outro with you playing. That'd be great.
Awesome. That would be good.
When we had Ian Anderson on, we did hope that he'd say he wanted to play flute on it, but he didn't offer.
Nope.
Yeah, you've done well for some high profile guests, haven't you? I feel
we've some really good.
I feel massive imposter syndrome with some of the people you've had on here, like Bernard Cornwell, and I don't know how much we're doing for time, but I was quite interested in sort of people's backgrounds and how they've got into writing, because obviously talking about me and Ben Kane and Man Scott being vets, but Giles Christian's backstory about coming from a boy band and a model to becoming a writer of Viking fiction is fascinating stuff. And
It really was, because he said he'd never even been a reader. He'd never really read books, and yet he's such a good writer.
Successful, yeah. And I think as I've been stalking you on Facebook for a long time, Stephen, and you used to be a meter reader.
Yeah, for 18 years until just over a year ago, and
how'd you go from that?
I quite liked it. You know, it was a good. Yeah. I was the opposite from Giles. I always read books and had it in my head I would like to write, and I just eventually did it. But it is quite a difference from walking around all day in Glasgow, but taking abuse from people, and now sitting in a study all day. It's a bit of a change. Well, we can kind of move on from that and talking about moving from career to career. How do you think AI stroke chat GPT is going to affect all of us writers out here, and if we're going to have to find another job, because there's not going to be many left?
Yeah, I just saw you've done an episode on it, haven't you? I haven't listened to it. I think your last episode came out.
It was last week.
So I don't know if I can get over old ground, but it's I kind of got a bit sort of bit of an existential crisis when people talk about chat GP taking over everything and writing stories, and just thinking, is there going to be a need for what I do in a few years' time? But equally, is there going to be any need for anybody to do anything creative in a few years' time? And then you come around.
I think that's really the question.
Which then comes down to this kind of, what's the point of us? Are we just going to sort of be automatons that live to eat and breed and whatever? And if creativity is taken away from us.
I saw some great memes about when we were talking. We were preparing that. It's been a real hot topic, obviously, over the last few months. And so I keep talking about it with my wife, and I think she thinks I'm having some sort of crisis about it, because every now and again I get really down about it, and then I kind of think to myself, no, come on, just get on with life and don't be silly. And she was saying to me, we've been talking about it loads, and I saw these memes anyway, and it was basically something about, I thought that the future would be that the computers and the robots would do all the menial tasks while we sat back and had all the fun. I didn't think it would be the other way around.
Exactly,
it's like we're now saying they're going to be, the AI is going to be doing the artwork and writing the books and making the movies, and we're going to be frying McDonald's burgers or something. Flipping burgers.
We won't even be needed for that either. The robots will be able to do that. Same as they'll deliver all the Amazon stuff will be delivered by robots. There won't be a job for us.
I did have this kind of revelation, if that's the right word. It just made me think that actually, if you think about your favorite bands and your favorite writers and your favorite books, would you feel the same about reading those or listening to them if you knew they'd been written by a robot? Because I think part of the act of consuming art is kind of connecting with the creator. I sound like a real arse now, but it's
I think this is a really interesting question. I think this is a really important question, and I think some people would care and some people won't, and that's the interesting
how many
question,
really.
See, I mean, like Dream Theater, I love the characters in the band. I know their backstories, and you can kind of hear their personalities in the music. And if a robot tried to recreate it, I don't think I'd bother, even if it was quite a faithful
But what about let's go forward 20 years in the future, though, and what about if your young self is listening to this band and it's got all these characters and you love them, and then you suddenly found out after loving the band for 20 years that they were all made up, and they were all avatars, and all the backstory was made up as well, and you thought that you could believe, that you'd seen their
Truman Show stuff
coming through, but they're all just made up. And so, if the AI gets good enough, and I'm not talking like next week, but maybe in 10 years, 20, 30 years down the line, maybe that's the reality.
Yeah, I mean, but then there'd have to be a level of dishonesty within the industry, wouldn't there, to carry it off? I'm
sure there is. I wouldn't worry about that.
Like, we don't think industry's dishonest.
Yeah, no, I know what you mean. But then it becomes down to I guess you couldn't do much in the way of sort of writing under pen names. You'd have to be the personality behind the book. You'd have to get out there and do the podcasts and do the festivals and things, so people actually connect with you. So
I think that's probably where things are going anyway. If you think about social media and the fact that Stephen and I are actually doing this now and talking to you, and we all are on social media and doing all these things, and it's become much more of a a thing for writers to have to sort of put themselves out there
completely
and show their personality. And I take photos, little videos of me walking around talking with my dog, wandering around behind me or whatever, and it's all this sort of stuff. I mean, my dog gets more fan mail than me, almost, if I post stuff about my dog on Facebook. But it's sort of showing, whereas in the past, if we liked I don't know, David Gemmell, for example, back in the 80s and 90s. I loved his books. I didn't know anything about the guy, really. You read little snippets, maybe in an interview or something, and that'd be it. He wasn't,
although
unless you met him face to face at an event or something.
I think, although with David Gemmell in particular, he was from my hometown of Hastings, and what I do know about him was that
everybody's from your hometown.
He was there as well.
He was writing Legend. That's his first one, wasn't it? He was writing it while he had cancer, and he hadn't decided on the the ending, depended on whether he survived the cancer or not, and as to whether Druss the Legend survived or not. It was he was going to write different stories depending on whether he was going to make it or not. I know clearly he did.
It was whether Druss Delnock would fall or not, isn't it? Because Druss, I don't want to spoil.
Oh yes, sorry, it's a long time ago.
I think Druss's end maybe was written in the book, or whatever. But it's whether the castle fell or not.
Right. Yeah. So, but no, I know what you mean. There's lots of other authors that I like, people like David Eddings and things I used to read that I didn't know anything about.
Yeah. So I think we're probably getting close to the end of the time, of our allotted time, not on Earth, hopefully, but in this interview. So we've already talked to you about what music you listen to, so we can skip that as one of our final questions. But what have you been reading recently, and what have you been watching?
So I've been watching. I've been binge watching Ted Lasso lately, which is
good.
It's turned out to be it's quite uplifting. It's quite feel good comedy actually, but it's turned out to be
very good, very feel good.
Funny, yeah. And I've been watching for slightly weird reasons. I've been watching Call My Agent in French. The weird reason
I watched the whole series of that
in French.
In French,
yeah,
and then tried to watch the English version of the remake, and it was horrible. I couldn't do it.
Yeah, the weird bit of it is that my daughter was doing an apprenticeship, and she was a bit bored, and she just one day she said to me, "Dad, do you fancy if I do a French A level, will you do it with me?" And I went, "Oh yeah, all right. If you do it, I'll do it." So kind of to encourage her. And then she finished the apprenticeship, decided she wanted to do some other A levels, and abandoned the French. But I'm kind of a bit of a completer finisher, so I'm still stuck doing it while she's not.
So you're doing a French A level?
I do French. I'm halfway through a French A level at the moment.
And a PhD.
Yeah,
PhD French A level and writing historical fiction, and I think you're a bit of an overachiever, but also this sticker at it kind of mentality is good for getting things done, but also maybe you need to be careful what you start next.
No, absolutely. Well, this is the thing. Once the PhD is done, I'm definitely going to dial it back a little bit.
Although saying that, there's probably something in all of us, that has to be a completer, finisher kind of person.
You have to drive novel, surely.
Where we are, you have to have a drive. And I remember going back a few years, I was singing in a band, I was working full time, I was writing, and my wife kind of said to me, maybe something, maybe you need to relax. Something needs to give.
Yeah. Well, there's no way I could have done all this stuff.
The band
There's no way I could have done all this stuff and been even a part-time vet. It would have just taken up too much brain space. So being able to step away from that and do this has been really good. Yeah.
So what have you been reading?
Yeah, I'm reading. Reading kind of a bit eclectic at the moment, but I've been listening to Elric and Melniboné audiobook, which I've always heard great things about and never got around to reading. It's kind of a bit dated, but you can see where a lot of things of inspirations come from. So it's quite interesting from that point of view. I've just read this really weird book I found in a secondhand bookshop called the Dictionary of the Khazars, and it's a non-linear read. It's written in 1982 by a Yugoslavian professor who and then translated from the Serbo-Croat into English, and it's a very niche find. But it's I don't know how to describe it in short. I'll try and be concise. It's 3 dictionaries written around the 16th century, describing the same event, but from the point of view of Muslims, Christians, and Jews who were all at this event, which was the conversion of the Khazars, who are a real people, but the entire everything that happens in the book is fictional. So all these three different religions wanted to convert them to their own faith, and in each of the three different dictionaries, they succeeded. So each one contradicts themselves. And although it's just purely lexicographical entries, dictionary entries, it kind of tells a story as a whole, and it encompasses what happened in the 8th century, what it encompasses what the 16th century dictionary writers were doing, and what happens in the sort of 1980s as people were rediscovering this stuff. So it's kind of hard to get your head around. And just to make it extra weird, there's a male and a female version of the book which differ by one paragraph. So you can, so it's really out there.
This is very strange. So this is, I'm guessing this was a bestseller that sort of just slipped past, and we didn't notice.
I think
it
maybe
at the time,
a cult, maybe one of those little sort of cult successes or something. But yeah, I just found it in a secondhand bookshop and just flicked through it. Went.
I can't believe that you picked that up and actually decided to read it. It sounds absolutely obtuse. And
have you read both versions?
But I've got the male version, but I've googled what it says in the female.
You'll
version.
have to get the female then.
No, I've googled what it says in the female version.
Yeah.
It doesn't make a lot of difference, to be honest. But I quite like that sort of non-linear reading stuff. I don't read too much of it because it's such hard work. But I don't know if you ever come across House of Leaves by Daniel something or other. This is like a horror story written in a very strange style, and it's about a documentary maker who makes a film about a haunted house, and then it's about the book written about the documentary. And then the book is then discovered by somebody making footnotes at the bottom of it. So you're reading three kind of stories simultaneously. And it's just, the whole effect is really unsettling. But it's hard to read. It takes a while. I'm not sure. I think I kind of probably skim it a bit too much. I don't, people go into massively analyze these sorts of things, but I kind of just get out of it what I can, I think.
Wow, I think you've blown my mind. That's got to be the weirdest book that anybody said they're reading.
Yeah, that's the weirdest answer.
Yeah, Dictionary of the Khazars, I'm not sure I'd recommend. It was interesting, but I would really recommend House of Leaves. I even got my mum to read it, and she's just said it was weird, but she did actually read it all the way through. So give it a try, because it will be, and you've got to read it in a paperback version. You can't read it on a Kindle or anything.
Yeah, well, okay. We do usually ask 2 questions at the end, but you've already answered the one about listening to music when you write. But I'll ask you, what have you been listening to this week? Anything new?
Well, just come back from a few days in New York with my daughter. So I'm still a bit jet lagged actually. So if I haven't made a lot of sense, that's what I'm blaming. So we did a jazz crawl around Harlem. We did a guided tour around these clubs in Harlem. Right. We went to see a couple of swing bands, so that was. So I've just been tried drumming along to some of that actually. So I usually just sort of, I'm not a very good drummer. I just drum like along to Green Day and stuff like that. And so but doing it to some swing was quite interesting.
Well, I think that's it. So thanks very much for your time, and best of luck with Caesar's Soldier.
Thank you very much.
Which is looks out at the end of the month, right?
The cover art's brilliant. Canelo are amazing at covers.
Yeah, the covers really helpful, aren't they? And I've got some kind comments from some other authors on it, so that's quite nice. So yeah, it's due out on the 22nd, I think, of June.
I think this will probably go out about the day after that, if it's a Thursday.
Awesome.
Yeah. No, best of luck with it.
Thank you very much.
We'll look forward to speaing to you again in a year or two when you've got some more books to talk about your PhD.
Yeah, I'll let you know what my conclusions were.
Oh yeah, and we can do it in French. Yeah.
Lumon.
Bon. Au revoir.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me on, guys.
Thank you, Alex. That was great.
Thanks, Alex. That's it for today's episode. We hope you've enjoyed it. If you have, please take a moment to leave a review on whatever platform you're listening on, and don't forget to subscribe.
Let us know if you have any questions or things you would like us to cover in future episodes. We're on Facebook, facebook.com/Rock Paper Swords podcast, and Twitter @rock_swords. You can find out more about our books on MatthewHarvey.com and StephenAMackay.com.
The theme music is written and performed and copyrighted by us. Until next time, on Rock, Paper, Swords, it's goodbye from me, Matthew Harvey.
And it's goodbye from me, Stephen A. Mackay.
And remember, whatever action and adventure you have going on in your life, be kind,
stay safe,
and happy reading.
And today's outro music was recorded by Alex Gough. Enjoy.